One of the first things I realized when I started paying more attention to trading card markets is that most of us, and mainly me, have a very fuzzy understanding of value. We think we know what makes a card valuable, but when you actually start looking at sales data, things get weird very quickly. You might see cards numbered to 299 selling for more than cards numbered to 25, or more often I see like cards numbered to 10 selling for more than cards numbered to 5 or 50. People love gold, right? So cards numbered to 50 selling for more than cards numbered to 25. You'll see PSA 10s worth 5 times more than PSA 9s, despite looking almost identical to normal people. I often use the try to explain this to my wife test with these kinds of things, and the befuddlement when you explain that this is worth 5 times more because that number is 10 instead of 9 is always a sight to behold. You'll see one player's market go completely nuclear after a tournament or during a tournament, and then just drift down 6 months later or completely collapse. I always think of Cody Gakpo during the 2022 World Cup. Those who are doing prism breaks will know that like Cody Gakpo autos were the big chase for that one, and now his market doesn't exist. And it's at that point that you start to realize that value in trading cards is not one thing, it's several things layered together. So in this video, I want to try and break down the main drivers that I see of card value in a way that makes sense, just sort of practical thinking out loud here. Because I think understanding this is probably the foundation for everything else, right? And the first thing to understand is this: a card is only ever worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. And that's a sentence that I say a lot to my kids when they ask me how much I sold a trading card that they like, how much did somebody pay for it? And just their confusion about these kinds of things. And it sounds obvious, but I think collectors in particular forget this constantly, and especially when they're looking at rare cards. They go, this card is numbered to 10, it must be worth loads. And that's not necessarily true, because rarity alone does not equal value. Demand matters just as much, if not more. If a card is numbered to 10, but nobody really cares about the player, or the set, or the design, or the product, then that rarity does not magically create a market. It just creates a rare object, and those things are not the same thing. And this is a big reason why somebody like Lionel Messi sustains value so consistently, because there's enormous global demand for Lionel Messi trading cards, and that might be collectors, it might be football fans, investors, Argentina fans, Inter Miami fans, Barcelona fans, people who watched him growing up. That demand base is massive. But a random rookie defender numbered to 5 might technically be a rarer card than a Lionel Messi, but the market for that player is tiny. And I see this on eBay all the time. If I go prospecting, I'll see people who have put a midfielder for a random European club numbered to 5 valued for more than a Lionel Messi Silver World Cup Prism, and it just blows my mind, right? That obviously you can put any asking price you want on eBay, but still, it's not going to work. So the first major idea is this: value is usually where rarity and demand meet, not rarity alone, not demand alone. And honestly, I think a lot of new collectors get trapped by rarity. They see a gold to 50 or an orange to 25, a black to 10, maybe even a 101, right? And their brain immediately goes, ultra rare equals ultra valuable. And I get that from I think when you're young and you're collecting, you get drawn to that. But scarcity only matters if people care, right? And that's true in every market. Now, the second thing that drives value, I think, is player narrative. And this might be the biggest factor in modern sports cards where hype is king. Modern cards in particular, heavily narrative driven, and you'll hear a lot of people talking about the fact that there is no real link between performance on the court or the pitch or the ground and the price of cards. People are not buying players as they currently are. They're buying the story they believe could happen, and that's why prospect markets can become insane, right? Because people are pricing in future greatness. And in May 2026, take somebody like Lamine Yamal. Okay, part of his market, most of his market, isn't based on what he's already achieved. He has achieved a lot of things, but that's not what his market is representing. His market is representing what people think he could become. And that creates volatility, because these expectations become enormous, that hype. If the player keeps rising, fantastic, prices can explode and you get priced out. But if that development stalls, again, Cody Gakpo, I'm looking at you, the market can cool quickly, very quickly. And that's why prospecting is risky. It's not wrong. I'm not here to tell you that prospecting is right, wrong, otherwise. But compared to more stable assets, it's risky, relatively speaking. You're investing in uncertainty, and sometimes that uncertainty becomes superstardom. But the vast majority of the time it doesn't. Okay, and importantly, hype and long-term demand are not always the same thing, and that's a massive distinction, right? Hype is that short-term excitement. Long-term demand is sustained cultural importance, and there's only a few people who have that, and those are very, very different. Another huge driver of value is condition, and this is where grading comes in, whether you agree or don't agree with grading. Modern cards especially, condition changes everything. A PSA 10 is not just a nicer copy than a PSA 9. In many markets, it's treated like a different asset entirely. And that confused me a little bit initially, because visually PSA 9s and PSA 10s look extremely similar, especially given, and let's be kind here, but it's a fairly arbitrary nature of PSA's grading process. If anybody's submitted cards before, knowing the difference between a 9 and a 10, often, it might just be that you got somebody on a good day, on a bad day, okay? And I definitely went through a period where I thought, well, I'm just going to buy PSA 9s of these cards because they're just as good as the PSA 10s. But there's a reason why those markets are different. And the market cares about PSA 10s because PSA 10s represent scarcity at the highest grade. And there's the collector psychology of it, of knowing that you hold the best possible copy of it, and the liquidity of a PSA 10, because that last one matters a lot, right? PSA 10s are often easier to sell because more people want it, more people trust it, more people search for a PSA 10 specifically because they want the best thing that they can get. And that liquidity itself creates extra value. Which brings me to another point that I've started to realize having sold in the last 6 months, which is that liquidity is incredibly important. And most collectors, I wonder if most collectors actually think about it. Now, liquidity basically means to me, how easily can I buy or sell this thing at fair market price? Now, some cards are highly liquid. There are always buyers, there are always sellers, there's always market activity. Again, I go back to Lionel Messi. Okay, there's almost always a market for a Lionel Messi card. If you price it at fair market price, somebody will probably buy it. The reason why your Messi is not selling is because you've probably overpriced it. Okay, if you want to test the thesis, underprice it and see what happens. Okay, but others are incredibly illiquid. Okay, you might own a rare card worth theoretically good money, but finding the actual buyer could take months. I have a Kylian Mbappe Merlin number to 10 right now that I'm going through with this. I've had it up for about 2 months. Quite a lot of followers, almost no offers for it. Okay. And that's because the market from an Mbappe number to 10 is not the same as a market for a Messi or others, okay? And it's important because a market with regular sales gives you confidence in that pricing, but a market with almost no sales becomes much more difficult to interpret. You have those fewer data points, right? And that's why one sale can sometimes completely distort perception, right? So you'll see, you go to eBay and you click on sold items and you'll see that one sold for £800. You go, great, that's my market point, £800. But if that's the only sale of that card in 6 months, what does that really tell you? Because maybe 2 people got into a bidding war, right? Maybe the market was peaking at that point. Maybe it was an outlier. Maybe it was a shield bid. Maybe the next sale is going to be £500. And that's where I think collectors, including me, we get trapped emotionally, right? We anchor to the highest number, not the realistic number, but the highest number, or the number that fits the narrative we tell ourselves in our heads. And that's dangerous. Another thing I've started noticing is that brand matters a lot. Okay, not all products are viewed equally. Not all sets are viewed equally. Not all parallels are viewed equally. Collectors build preferences over time, and the market will tell you what these are. You can have a decision. You can say, I like Merlin. I think Merlin looks fantastic. I think Merlin looks better than every other set. That's great. Have that opinion. Fantastic. But the market is going to tell you which one is preferred. And collectors build these preferences. Certain brands develop prestige. Prism, whether you like it or not, again, your taste doesn't matter. That brand develops prestige. Certain designs become iconic where you want it, whether you like it or not. The 2022 Qatar World Cup base set has become iconic in football circles. Okay, certain rookie cards become culturally important. You'll hear a few people say this. Like, you can decide, well, this is not their true rookie. Whether you go buy them then. Buy the cheap true rookie, scare quotes. The market's going to tell you whether or not that's the most culturally important one or not. Okay, and that matters. And it also means that not all rarity is equal, right? A number 25 from a highly respected set, such as a Prism, will probably massively outperform a number to 10 from a weaker product, again, like Merlin, right? So context matters and timing matters. Card markets are not logical. They're not rational. They're emotional. Prices can, but don't always, move around tournaments or injuries, transfers, transfer rumors, championships, baked in championships, media attention, even social media clips. which means timing can massively affect what people are willing to pay. And the same card can have wildly different demand at different moments. And I think understanding that emotional cycle is probably one of the hardest parts of the whole hobby. Because when prices are flying upwards, everybody feels clever. You're really smart. Like, hey, look, I had this thing and I've sold it at 5x. Fantastic. That's when discipline, though, becomes the hardest. So I think the biggest thing I'm taking away is trading card value. If anybody tries to explain to you that trading card value is simple, they're probably either underestimating it themselves or lying to you, because it's not just rarity, it's not just the player, it's not just the grading, it's a combination of those things plus the supply, the demand, the narrative, how you interpret the narrative, the condition, how you interpret the condition, liquidity, timing, and psychology. And I think most of us, me especially, tend to focus on whichever one makes us feel best about the cards we already own or the players we're already invested in, which is probably not the best way to analyze a market, right? What we want is data. What we want is something to anchor to that we can trust, to take the biases away, take the psychological side away, and make the smart decision rather than the decision that our gut is telling us we want to do this. So in the next episode, if you want to take a data-driven approach to these things like I do, I want to start looking at one of the biggest tools that we use to analyze card data properly, and that's Card Ladder, the app Card Ladder or the website Card Ladder. Because right now, when I look at Card Ladder, I look at the graphs and I look at the squiggly lines and whatnot, but I'm not convinced I really understand what they're telling me yet. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.